This is Platemark with me, Ann Schaefer. I'm an independent curator specializing in works on paper, prints, drawings, photographs, and books. But prints are my special love. I admit it. I love this corner of the art world, the print and printmaking corner, and I love it because people are super nice. The equipment required for printmaking means that you have to collaborate and work with other people. It's a communal kind of activity, and it means that people have to be open and share what they know with each other, and it just makes for a really interesting and productive and happy place. Today I'm introducing you to Cole Rogers, who is a master printer who co-founded C&C Editions recently after his long tenure and founding of Highpoint Editions in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Cole talks about his journey into printmaking and his approach to the creative process and the importance of experimental collaboration with artists. We talk about his time at Highpoint, which was founded as a nonprofit printmaking studio because he and Carla McGrath, his partner, felt that there was a real hole in the landscape in Minneapolis, that artists couldn't continue printmaking after they finished with their schooling. The studio aims to support all stages of an artist's career, so they at Highpoint offer kids classes all the way up through a co-op for makers, and also, of course, publishing of editions with Cole as the printer and project manager. Through it all, and at the new studio, C&C Editions, they emphasize the importance of creativity and exploration. And Cole's happy place is working with artists and trying to break free of everyone's knowledge banks and try something new and see what happens. I hope you'll enjoy the conversation. Any images that Cole and I talk about will be over in the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. You can follow along as we talk, or you can watch the video on YouTube, which will give you the images right in front of you. Let's see, housekeeping. I identify as a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I record Platemark in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. All right, let's get rolling. Cole, great to see you today. Thank you so much for coming on Platemark.
Well, thank you, Ann. It's great to see you, even if it's virtual. After all these years of getting to see you at all the fairs and everything, it's a real pleasure to be invited to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Oh, of course, you're welcome. Yeah, you've always been on my list, so here we are. First order of business is to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Cole Rogers. I'm residing on Dakota land here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Been here for about 35 years. Yeah, and I make prints. Pretty straightforward.
That was very concise. Let's back up.
Sure.
You now are in a new shop. You just left and retired from, I guess, not really retired, from Highpoint Editions, which is probably how most people know you.
Sure.
Yeah, but so what's the new venture?
C&C Editions. Yeah, we just started with our first artist, Julie Buffalo Head, and are in the midst of working with Julie. I've got a nice little roster of artists that we're looking forward to working with.
Well, first of all, where did you grow up?
Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, wow. I do always have detected a slight Southern accent out of you, but I wasn't sure from where.
Yes, well, it's a fairly unique accent. My mom's from Virginia, my dad's from North Carolina, and growing up in the Deep South, I was teased because I didn't have the exact same twang as everybody else. I had more of a drawl, and so I used to tell people I was from Texas or other places. But yeah, it's only a few people get the accent first off. When I first moved to Minnesota, a lot of people were saying that I sounded like Billy Bob Thornton or Crocodile Dundee. And this little girl that was playing in the neighborhood comes over and says, "Are you from Alabama?" I said, "Whoa, you nailed it. How do you know?" She said, "You sound just like Forrest Gump."
Oh,
yeah, well, okay, you got it. But yeah.
I've never thought about there being a difference between a drawl and a twang.
Oh, there definitely is.
I guess so. Can you help me understand it?
No, I'm not a linguist. I'm not a linguist. I don't really have a great ear for it.
No. funny. So growing up in Alabama, I'm sure you knew you were an artistically focused sort of person from right away, because everybody I ask is like, oh, we always knew.
Yeah, I didn't really know. No, my mom was a drafts person, and my dad did advertising art, and they both were very artistically inclined. My dad had done costume design in New York for a while, about 8 years in the 50s. I grew up with a lot of handicrafts in the house, but I was an extremely poor student. Extremely poor. I mean, the only term that people had back in those days was dyslexia. I really hated most of classwork because so much of it was memorization. And it just bored the hell out of me. The idea of sitting down and memorizing states or presidents' names or something that I was supposed to regurgitate just bored me to hell. Yeah, it was terrible. And I did know that rather than English, where you had to learn what a participle or other structure was, I really preferred literature because it was a narrative. And there was more active engagement on the reader's part than actually just learning this thing that you regurgitated. So I liked building things. I liked taking things apart and putting them together. I liked taking materials and making something new from it. So I knew that creativity or exploration was something that I was interested in. So I didn't know that I wanted to be an artist, but I knew that I got bored with things that were redundant, that I really wanted to explore areas that I didn't quite know about, areas that I had a chance to make my own. I could take something and yeah, so it was the creative process rather than an artist. I didn't know what an artist was. We went to a museum. I didn't know any artists. I didn't know anybody that made a living. I knew people that were doctors or veterinarians or the garbage man or electricians, but an artist wasn't even something that I could even fathom. I didn't know any professional artists. So I knew that I enjoyed creating things, but I didn't identify with being an artist because I didn't know that that was a possibility.
I agree with you. My father begged me not to do studio art in college, and and
Uh,
and it was for the very same reason. Like one could not foresee a possible career path going that direction. But part of the podcast is trying to help people understand that there are so many ways to apply your
yeah.
creativity within the art world / ecosystem. It's kind of endless possibilities, really. I feel like we were done a disservice as children.
Yeah, yeah.
So when did you finally figure it out?
In undergrad, I barely made it out of high school. Got into undergrad, and I was just really trying to muscle my way through some classes that I hated. I wanted to be either in architecture or engineering, I thought, both of which were influenced by the fact that I took 4 years of drafting in high school, along with art. Those were a couple of things I liked, but drafting was the closest thing that I could come up with to visual art in my mind of a job skill or a career. So I thought that I wanted to go into engineering. But once again, all your core classes were so rote oriented. I took an art class, and it was with this big burly guy who rode on a Harley and was not your average artist, John Dillon. And he was very inspiring, even though one of his first classes, he told everybody that if you could do anything in this life and make a living and be happy at it rather than art, that he would suggest doing that because you'd make a better living at it. He was very straightforward, but he said, if this is the only thing that you can do and be happy, then do it. And I was faced with intaglio, which was just the kind of resistance that I needed. Some people need resistance when they're making things, and some people like a more direct approach. And personally, I liked materials that would resist a little bit. And you have to figure out how they want to work. It has to be a collaboration with the materials because a painter might go straight forward at something, whereas a printmaker oftentimes has something that's between them and the surface or the outcome. And you have to negotiate that outcome. And for me, it was figuring out how to get things to work. And like I keep saying, it's a negotiation or collaboration with those materials. And I just fell in love with it. It was something that, there's that what people term the magic moment, or the little gift that something happens that you didn't expect. And those were the kinds of things that really drove me forward and what made me keep wanting to try and see what I could find at each turn. Each new technique gave me more and more opportunities. And it was just something that I wasn't finding in the other classes. And after a very short period of time, I really realized that that was what I wanted to be studying. That going into a classroom and being given something where I took down notes, and then at the end of the class, I was supposed to regurgitate or put down those exact same answers, was not something that really inspired me. I just was not inspired by that at all.
Huh. When you say resistance, do you just mean that it's non-direct, it's not linear, that there's some thing you have to go around and negotiate? Or do you mean that that's what you mean, right?
All the above. Yeah.
Okay.
And a story that I use a lot is in graduate school, a trick that we would use in Art 101. Part of it was send them out to get sticks to make drawings. And you never told them that they were going to actually have to draw with a stick. They thought they were going to draw the stick, and they'd get back and they'd use the stick with ink, and they'd have to dip it in the ink and use that to draw with. And it really pissed them off. They were just livid. They hated it. What they wanted to do is get out their number 2 pencil that they'd sharpen to a really sharp point that they felt comfortable with. And the drawings that they would produce were some of the best, most intense drawings because they were fighting. They really, there was more expression there than the little squeaky number 2 pencil where they had the safety of that eraser. The intensity that experience brought to it really informed the outcome. And that kind of resistance sometimes helps focus the mind and focus your intent. And I think that any artist that I've ever met that really wants to create, wants to go in and learn something they didn't know when they went into the studio, if they already knew what they're going to make, if they had full control over the outcome, it would just be going in and doing the same thing every day. And I think everybody likes going in and going through an exploratory process where in the end they learn something they didn't know when they walked in. And that is the creative process, and that's what gets people excited about going into the studio. Sometimes that resistance, or you go back to stories of, say, Kandinsky walking into his own studio and the painting was upside down, or it takes sometimes that, quote, happy accident, that thing that makes you go like, wow, I didn't know. Early on, when I was a young printer working with an artist, I told Eric Avery how to mix something up. And I said, after you've shaken it up, there'll be foam on top, and you spoon that off and don't use it. Of course, he used it, and it was beautiful. And working with artists, oftentimes the exact same thing that you're not supposed to do is what you have to do to figure out a new solution to an old problem. If you keep doing the same thing over and over, you're going to get the same thing. And
right.
So that resistance sometimes helps you get over yourself.
Okay.
If any of that makes sense.
No. It makes complete sense. But I'm thinking back to my own very, very short moment in studio art, thinking first they want to teach you how to render a thing, right, with your sharp HB pencil. I don't know how long it takes for everybody, but it takes some amount of time to get to that precipice where you're able to open yourself to fucking up.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I never got there, which is why I stopped doing it. Because it's a leap of faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And, an artist really needs to be able to walk that line. And if you're afraid of failure, then you're afraid of creating. Any kind of research that doesn't have a certain amount of failure involved means you're not pushing your own ability, pushing the materials. And there's nothing wrong with tearing something up. Jeff Sipple, who I studied with, said that the person he stayed with, lithography, said, don't be afraid of the graining sink. Go back. Sometimes you need to tear something up. And that goes back to my own experience with trying to write, was oftentimes I'd be writing and I would have a turn of phrase or a sentence that I really, really liked, and it was precious. And I would try and massage a whole paragraph to fit that one sentence. And if I would just throw away that sentence, the whole paragraph could be better. And that sense of preciousness you have to let go of. If you're afraid of taking that leap of faith, stepping into that place where you don't know and being uncomfortable for a bit, then you're probably not going to find progress.
Does this inform who you invite to come make work with you?
Yeah, because most of the time, someone who is making lithographs on a daily basis, then to bring them in to make a lithograph might not make sense because they're already doing that. That's something that's part of their practice. They know how they like to do it. I really like working with artists who either haven't made a lot of prints or have an experimental approach. And as a collaborating printer, I try not to hold onto the reins real tight and tell them each step. I really want them to explore the medium themselves. I hope it's a journey that we take together, not that I'm leading them. It's kind of like the difference if you go on a guided tour and somebody explains everything to you, then and interprets what you're supposed to be seeing at the end of the tour. It's been completely curated and selected by what they've wanted to tell you. And as a collaborating printer, I like giving artists materials, and if they knew the process, they would do things in a particular way. And they would do things the right way. And since sometimes they're not familiar with it, they want me to do something that I don't know how to do. And it's important that we take that journey together because of two things. One is what they're asking might work. I might not think it's going to work, but I've got to give it a try, because if it works, then I and the artist learn something. But then if it doesn't work, then the artist knows that I've got their back, that there's trust. If you're constantly saying, no, we can't do that, no, you can't do that, why did they even come to work in your studio? Sometimes you have to say, well, I don't think it'll work. Or, of course, you have to say no sometimes. But 9 times out of 10, I try and say yes whenever possible. And that's the best way to learn and grow. And I'd like to send you a link to the show at Minneapolis Institute of Art from 2022 of the work that we produced at Highpoint. I think it's got a really wonderful range of work. And I think you'll see that there's lithography, etching, woodcuts, screen prints in all sorts of different sizes, all sorts of different styles. And I think it really represents the range of artists that we had in over that time. And I think each artist was given an opportunity to really explore according to what interested them rather than having a format. There are a certain number of studios, I think you can see their style because they only do one particular process and the size is usually about the same and they have a quote look. And I really like getting away from that and having each project take on its own path.
Yeah, I mean, one could see benefits to both directions, right? Like it's nice to be able to identify a beautiful color etching from Crown Point, but you're right, there is a look for sure. It's pristine and bright white paper and whatever else. Yeah. Well, so let's talk about Highpoint because you were there. In my brain, you founded Highpoint. Did I dream that? Yep. You did. Okay.
My exploration of printmaking coincided with an interest in ceramics. Both are studios where you share space with other people. and you share the excitement of unloading the kiln or whatever. And there's a lot of kind of cross fertilization going on in the studio. And I always loved that. I went to Ohio State, got the same thing, Tamarind Institute at Tamarind. I didn't really realize that June Wayne, I just thought that Tamarind was a place where you went to study lithography. I didn't realize that in '59, when June Wayne started it, there was this idea that it would produce master printers that would go out and start studios. And I had no interest in starting a studio. I didn't even have any idea that that was part of the curriculum. But as part of the curriculum, we had to propose a studio and we had to put together a business plan. And this was in '89 at the end of a cycle of very inflated art prices, and the art market collapsed. A lot of people had been purchasing print speculatively. The idea being that prints in editions are fairly stable price wise and they're inexpensive. So rather than buying one Helen Frankenthaler for $100,000, an investor could get 10 different prints by 10 different artists, diversify their portfolio. So when the market crashed, all those prints went back on the market, and the idea of starting a studio that was solely publishing made no sense. So part of my plan was to start a studio that would share publishing and public access. And that way you would defer some of your expenses, or shall I say, bring in different revenue streams. So I kind of parked that, and I moved to Minneapolis and was working in a professional studio. And at night, I continued making my artwork, but it was very lonely. There were not other people around. And I looked for a studio in Minneapolis, and there was not one. After 3 years of working professionally in that studio, I went to Minneapolis College of Art and Design, where I ran their printmaking program. And it was great. I loved the job. I loved teaching. It was fantastic. But there's no place for my students to go when they graduated. And it felt problematic. It felt like I was at the top end of a Ponzi scheme where all these kids are taking out student loans on their future. They're coming out at that time, and this was 20 years ago, they're coming out with $60,000 in student loan debt on something they couldn't continue practicing. You know, there wasn't a litho stone in Minnesota that they could draw on. So I got to thinking somebody really needed to start a studio, and I met Carla McGrath, who was at the Walker Art Center teaching kids, and she was looking for an etching press that she could use to teach kids coming through the Walker printmaking in conjunction with the Frank Stella show of Tyler Graphics work. One night, we were doing an adult class, and after the adults had left, we were cleaning up after the class, and I told her about this wacky idea of starting a studio. And she said, would there be a place for kids there? And I'm like, nah, I don't think so. You know, that wasn't in my conception. And I went home and I was thinking, well, my idea was this studio where adults would be. Like, where are the adults going to come from? I'm thinking about students now. I'm not thinking about the future. I'm not thinking about how do we keep this whole cycle going. It just made more and more sense. And so Carla and I got to talking, and that was in 1997. And so we started putting together a business plan, and it took essentially 4 years before we opened. We went and visited other studios, looked at how other studios ran, and opened Highpoint January 1 of 2001. And
were you married to Carla by then?
Nope. We married the following year. Yeah, we packed a lot in really quickly. And the idea of, if you don't know an artist in your life, how do you make that next step? How do you envision becoming a printmaker? And so Highpoint was really designed as something that would take people all the way through the first time that they ever saw printmaking up to professional artists that were coming in and making prints. There's the pre-COVID, I'm not sure what the numbers are now, but pre-COVID, we had over 5,000 kids a year that came through taking
Wow.
classes. We would do something called Free Ink Day on Saturdays, where anyone could come in and make a print, no reservation, no cost. We had a gallery that had 6 to 8 shows a year. The Artist Cooperative grew from just a few people. I think there's about 80 artists now that are co-op members. Those facilities are shared with the professional artists, and the professional studio, we would invite 3 to 4 artists a year. There were residencies for the Jerome emerging artists, residencies for the McKnight fellows who were established artists. So we really had a program that covered just about all stages of somebody's career. If you had never seen a print, you could come in and visit the gallery. If you had never made one, you could come in and do Free Ink Day. You could sign up for an adult class. We really felt it was important that it was a printmaking center rather than just a shop. We actually formed it as a nonprofit. The idea was that Carla and I knew that this was something that the community needed. Both of us loved our jobs. I loved teaching. I loved being at MCAD. She loved teaching kids at the Walker. But the community really needed something, and it needed to be able to live past our own interest. If it was started as a private shop, there are shops that go out of business all the time. Or I shouldn't say going out of business. There are so many shops that are started by a founder that what happens when that founder leaves? So you spend your life building this thing that then is dependent on your own lifetime. And so we really wanted it to be something that you set up a mission and get a board of directors who follow that mission statement so that hopefully when you leave that mission carries forward. If it were a private individual purchasing the studio, they could say, oh, those kids are a mess. We'll get rid of them. The artist cooperative isn't paying enough, so we're going to get rid of that. Well, that may happen, but that means that the mission needs to be rewritten and the board has to oversee it. It's a process that has to be thought through. So we started as a nonprofit, and that was opened January 1st, 2001. Carla retired at the end of 2022, and then I resigned just last year, 2023.
I admire you.
Thank you.
Deeply. Because, I mean, the whole nonprofit, I have a nonprofit brain for sure. And this idea of creating a shop in your own name as a glory project is wonderful. But as you say, like, then what happens? Because I don't know how all of these shops are going to, I don't think they have succession plans. I'm worried about all
Yeah.
like then what happens when so-and-so has to, whatever.
Well, that is the life cycle of a lot of these things. That the next person that comes in will take ownership, and there will be things that change. If you build a house and paint it a particular color and decorate it a certain way, and somebody else moves in, they're going to move around the furniture. You might not like it. You might not like the color they paint the walls. They might decide that they're going to take out the kitchen and do something. And yeah, it might hurt. And that's one of the reasons why I resigned. It's part of the life cycle. And at some point, you've created this thing that has to go on its own. I'm super proud of where we got Highpoint. We created something that didn't exist. There are jobs that have been created. There have been people who have come through, they've learned about printmaking. There are people that have been able to continue their printmaking. There are hundreds or thousands of prints being made that wouldn't have been made otherwise. When we left, the building was paid off. There's no debt. We had a cash reserve that was greater than the yearly budget. We had just had a 8-gallery show at the Minneapolis Institute of Art with prints, and we've got a great reputation nationally, if not internationally. So I feel really great where Highpoint was positioned. And at some point, the child grows up, and you just feel like you put it in the position that needs to be, and where it goes, it's going to be where it goes. And there will be changes that.
Hard to watch.
Yeah, yeah.
Highpoint is a player on the international print stage. Like, we had you to Baltimore within 10 years of your founding. You guys just had ceaseless energy for it, and it was remarkable to watch.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's why I wanted to start another studio. I really felt that as much as I wanted to stay at Highpoint and continue to work on it, you build something, and Highpoint's facilities are just incredible. And it would have been really nice to stay, but at the same time, it was time for me to move out. And I wasn't finished working with artists, but it's part of my own evolution.
Well, so that brings up a great point, which is as you and Carla both left Highpoint and you've reorganized or rethought about what it is you want to do, you've gone for the collaborative printing publishing thing, and you've dropped off the classes. And
yeah,
right,
that's being done.
Yeah. Well, okay. All right.
Yeah, and it's like when we started Highpoint, people said, "Are you going to make paper? Or are you going to do letterpress?" And it's like, well, Minnesota Center for the Book Arts has got that covered. Or are you going to do this? With trying to cover too many things and mission creep, it just makes things harder to focus on what really needs to be accomplished. And Highpoint is 3 blocks from this studio. They have got an artist cooperative. They are teaching classes. So that's covered. So that's off of my plate. I don't have to do that anymore. I can concentrate on what I really love doing, which is working with artists and making prints.
Okay. Can you tell us about your most challenging edition that you made when you were at Highpoint? Not because of the artist, but be technical.
Yeah.
Let's not call anybody out.
Oh boy, it's hard to say anyone because they're like your children. They each have their own quirks and warts. One that was incredibly difficult because of some of the smallest things were Mungo Thompson, some Pocket Universe pieces that were made with foil that was incredibly delicate, and just any speck of dust that was trapped under the foil would show. And then there was some problems with something called galvanic corrosion that was coming up on the finished pieces, and it would tarnish, and a lot of tiny things. And I should have known, because when we first started talking, Mungo was talking about another project they did where they were printing on mirrors. And the people that were doing the printing were just going crazy because, once again, dust was getting on the mirrors, and they were having to do this printing in kind of these isolation rooms in suits that would trap the air. But that was one that just took forever. I guess those are just the ones that you fight through. I think for me, the most memorable or more fun, because I think just defining something by the difficulty is a little bit less interesting to me. But say with Willie Cole, when he came in and we started playing with the ironing boards that we later flattened out, that was a really great process. We had some different ideas defined early on, and it kept changing throughout the process. A Julie Meritou project that was pretty early, where we're doing sheen collé that was 4 different layers of Gampi on top of each other at like 30 by 40 inch scale, that really wasn't sure if it was going to work, but it did. The ones that I really remember the most were the ones where we weren't really sure if it was going to work, and we broke through into a new area, and it was distinctly about the artist's exploration of the media or the materials. Yeah, and sometimes it's difficulty just getting all the colors right. Sometimes it's difficulty getting things lined up in a particular way, or the way that light needs to shift. Some of the most difficult ones are like Mungo's, where there's a minimal amount of information and the little bit that's there has to be absolutely perfect, whereas other prints that might have a bajillion colors and a bajillion runs where tiny mistakes are hidden. But in those, sometimes it's pulling it all together so that the big picture, when you step away, things come into focus.
Yeah, I think people probably, well, I don't know if they'd be surprised or not, but that the simplest ones are the most persnickety because everything shows,
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never met Mungo. I would like to meet Mungo. He must be really fun to work with.
Oh, he was. He's a great guy. He's out of Los Angeles. His art is very much so about allowing the individual to discover something, because initially when you see it, you usually think you know what it is. And only with some investigation is it revealed that it's not. One of my favorite pieces I saw early on looked like pencils that were stuck in the ceiling. Back in grade school, we would take pencils and flip them up in the air and stick them in the ceiling. And so there are about 8 pencils sticking in the ceiling at a museum. You go through, and if you noticed it, first you had to notice it. And then if you noticed it, you thought maybe this bored guard standing in the corner had flipped these pencils into the ceiling, when in fact they were all handmade. Mungo carved them, painted them, stuck them in there. Another piece was some bird songs that had been slowed down that were installed in the underground garage at the Walker. And then some whale noises that were sped up to sound like birds that were installed in the sculpture garden. So in both instances, you thought you were hearing these whales in one instance that were birds, and birds that were actually whales. It's interesting. His art's a little tricky at first, but really interesting artist.
Yeah.
Very
No,
interesting.
I have to get in touch. Are you open to people sending you things and saying, "Hey, I'd love to work with you"? Or how do you,
Sure.
are you open? Okay,
Yeah.
some people aren't.
Yeah. The difficulty is that there are so many artists and so many projects and so little time. Early on at Highpoint, we had 3 curators that were helping me choose artists. One was at the Walker, one was Minneapolis Institute of Art, and another one was a gallery director. And it was very easy for us to go to studios and select artists. Well, before long, we had a list of 20 names, within the first 6 months. Well, you can't work with 20 artists in 6 months. And then the next 6 months, we had 20 more and then more. And so it ends up that, like right now, I've got at least 5 different artists that I've talked to about projects. When I left Highpoint, I had all these artists I've been talking about. I identified some artists that I thought that would be good starters for Highpoint in the transition when I left, and I gave them some names, and then I brought over some names, and that list is already so long that I'm open to looking at others, but it's hard to think that I'll ever get through all the artists that I'd like to work with.
Was there some sort of line in your brain over which you wouldn't cross, taking an artist that had worked at Highpoint and bringing them to the new shop?
No.
Okay. People print around.
Yeah. Well, and those relationships carry from shop to shop. There are plenty of artists to go around. It's not like you need to say you can't work with this person because, there's no ownership there.
That's good. In the new shop, you're doing all of the processes?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Are you making paper?
No. Sorry.
Sorry. Couldn't resist.
No, relief, etching, screen printing, lithography. We started out with screen printing and lithography, and it's hard. We've only been working in this studio for the last 7 months. So actually getting the electrical, plumbing, ventilation, everything open, we've barely gotten started.
Did you have to source all new presses and things?
Not new, but new
right.
to us.
Right.
Etching press that came out of Texas, a litho press that came out of California, a screen press that came out of Chicago, a bunch of stuff that came out of Jack Lemon's studio in Santa Fe, a drying rack out of Canada. So it's a mix of equipment.
Well, I think people who aren't in the actual making of prints world probably don't realize how big a network of people there are, and that everyone knows where the equipment goes, and there's always somebody who knows where to find something.
Yeah,
I think it's fascinating. I still want to write a book about which press came from whom to where, to the provenance of the presses, because they've always been
it
someplace really
is.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. And that's important to remember because there's a certain continuity and appreciation for tradition that doesn't mean that you need to be bound to it. But I think it's wonderful that you have some sort of a grounding.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a bestseller necessarily, but it would be,
Yeah, yeah,
it'd be on every print shop shelf, maybe.
yeah, yeah.
Of course, it'd probably be better if you did it online as a changeable document because people, move and close shops and things move, right?
All the time,
Yeah.
constantly.
So,
And that's the funny thing is most all of this equipment just came available right as I was thinking about starting a studio. And it was kind of overwhelming having all this equipment coming to me. Just all of a sudden it's available and it's like, oh, now I got to get a space. Now I got to get the space running.
I see you have a garage door behind you. The
Oh,
new
yeah.
space was what was it before?
It was an extension off of an existing building. We think it was probably a auto repair place, but when we got it, it had previously been a personal training space.
Oh,
So it was nice. It was a big open space with lots of light. And the garage door is wonderful for getting in big pieces of equipment. And it is ground floor.
yes, very, very key.
Yeah.
Do you have a gallery space attached?
Nope. Nope.
Want one? No, don't want one?
There's only so much you can do at one time. So maybe one day, but got to do one thing at a time. Trying, kind of going back to the idea of focus and staying away from mission creep.
Right, mission creep. Oh, that's a good one. And is Carla the business person?
She is involved.
I assume that's what C&C is, colon Carla.
Yes, well, it's definitely a nod to the last 25 years of what we built. She definitely is a sympathetic ear when I come home and like, oh, this didn't work or that didn't work.
Are you the only person there sort of full time? Yeah.
No, I've got this really wonderful person who is working with me, May Lam So. May got her undergrad printmaking degree from Madison, Wisconsin, then went to Iowa and was a intern at Highpoint for a year and is currently a Jerome artist in residency at Highpoint and has been just a huge part of getting this new studio off the ground.
That's
Just a
great.
very, very incredible person.
Yeah, everybody needs that
Oh,
second pair
yes.
of hands. Yeah.
Yes. Well,
Oh, that's great.
and going from a studio where I had, a minimum of 10 people around, if not as many as 30 or 40 at any one time, I knew that I didn't want to be a solo venture. And like with High Point, well, what will happen with this studio? Is there some way of handing it off?
You're already thinking about the succession plan.
Well, I'm not, I'm not designing it, but I'm thinking, yeah. Going back to your idea of the provenance of presses, I think all of us like the idea that once we move on, that there is someone else that's going to pick up that press or that roller and continue using it. That we're just all stewards of our profession and this equipment. And, our time with it is brief. And we really want to know that someone else is going to carry it on.
Yes, here.
Yeah. It's that challenge of throwing yourself once again into the unknown and working with what you're given. And that's exciting. That's really exciting. If you knew what was always coming down the pike, and I tell people a lot of the time, the last print that I would ever want to make is a very particular size, a very particular color. Everything's known. And you start out and you might as well be making stop signs. What it's going to read, what the colors are. It's like, what's fun about that? You're putting ink on paper, but what's the challenge? What have you learned that you didn't know? And
Huh.
so I think any chance to throw yourself into that kind of a learning experience and, Yeah, it's challenging. It's scary. Control is an illusion. I mean, come on. Yeah, who would want everything to be known? We think we do, but that would be a pretty boring existence.
Yeah.
It's the surprises in life, the things that you didn't know were there.
Right. Yeah. I like a certain amount of predictability,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
confess.
yeah.
But I completely appreciate your joie de vivre. I mean, it's really admirable, and I feel like I need to take more risks.
Well, and also risks come in all different shapes and sizes.
Right.
And what's risky for one person is not risky for another one. I have a fear of public speaking, and so for me to speak publicly, that's a bigger risk than it is for someone else. And so maybe I'm taking risks in different areas. I think we all have to figure out what works for us and what doesn't.
Yeah, I would not have known. I don't think I've seen you speak, have I?
Oh,
I feel
yes.
like when you and Carla came to the BMA, the Baltimore Museum, for one of the print fairs, and we gave you the award for that year for being amazing and fabulous, I'm wondering if Carla said something to the crowd instead of you. I can't remember now. It's a long time ago.
I did. And I was so
Yeah.
terrified that you looked at
Oh,
me and you went
I did.
to ask me to smile because I was so terrified. I think I was probably gritting my teeth.
I'm sorry.
No. It was it was helpful. But
Oh, good.
being dyslexic, the very first time that you speak publicly is reading in front of a class of your peers. At some point, the anticipation gets scary and the fear takes over. And so that was what I've always associated with public speaking is that fear.
I think that's fair. I mean,
Yeah.
you were rarely fearless in other areas of your life, so we're going to allow you one.
Thank you. Uh,
But the dyslexia, I think you and I are just about the same age. And I don't know that you or I had access to specialized teaching as kids to get you the toolbox you needed.
no, no.
Baltimore has two excellent schools that deal specifically with issues of dyslexia and learning challenges. That just was not a thing we
No.
even knew about.
No. And my poor parents went through hell because the teachers kept saying Cole's incredibly smart and gifted, but he won't, quote, apply himself.
Right.
That I was being lazy or I was just not paying attention. Well, I was not paying attention because you're asking me to memorize things that I had no interest in memorizing. And that's just not the way my brain worked. You're boring me to death and then telling my parents that I was being a bad student. But at that time, that's what they knew.
Right. Did they label you as hyperactive or something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The teachers liked me. I was respectful and I was funny and stuff, but I was always doing something other than sitting in my desk learning 1 + 1 = 2 or gerunds and participles.
Gerunds and I still don't know what the gerunds are.
Yeah, I wanted to be playing with something. I wanted
Sure.
something that was stimulating. Memorization was not stimulating.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I get some sort of satisfaction out of memorization. I don't think so. And at this point, people always say to me, how do you remember all of that stuff about art history or whatever? And the truth is, it's just accumulated knowledge. Like it's in there and I don't have to memorize it because it's been 40 years.
Well, and maybe the way it was presented to you was interesting, so you remember it.
Yes, I would say. I mean, art history, I always loved art history. And there were moments where I was like, ancient Egypt, I'm not so sure I'm, give a flying whatever. But when we started getting into modernism and stuff, I was fascinated by it. And the teachers were engaging and all that stuff. And that made the whole difference.
Yeah. I kind of carried that through when I was teaching before a class pretty early on. I thought, why do we give a syllabus at the beginning? That's the first thing you do. You walk in and the teacher says, here's your syllabus. And they walk through, we're going to do hard ground etching on this date. We're going to do soft ground this or whatever. And none of that means anything to someone. And so what I would do is like for lithography, The first thing is we would grain a stone, draw on it, process it, print it, or like when it came to trying to memorize artists, we wouldn't do that. We would put up slides, something that was more interesting. And then you introduce like the structure. But if the first thing that you're hit with is a structure and there's no flesh on it, how do you relate to it? And I think if somebody gives you a narrative or a way in, that then you can build a structure rather than structure being more important, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I think some brains just latch on to learning in different ways. That's, again, when I go back to collaborating with artists have different approaches to making things. And if you try and put everybody in the same mold, if you expect everybody to be able to relate to etching, no, there's somebody that lithography is going to do better. And when I was at Highpoint, I would usually start an artist on 2 or 3 different media, not making art. The idea was play with this, play with that, work in the studio for a few days, go back to your studio and kind of marinate. It's like, was this lithography thing really interesting? Or no, I never want to do that again. Or screen printing, there's something there. Let's try that.
Yeah.
And I always wanted it to be their journey and something that they were finding of interest. And it's like, let's try this rather than fitting everybody into the lithography mold. Because not everybody's going to respond to it that well. Not everybody learns that way.
Do you have an understanding of your approach to assessing a work of art when you go up to something new and the process you go through to try to decide if you like it or if it's good or bad? Or do you have any sense of that? I'm getting really curious about it because mine is very specific, but I had never thought about it until not too long ago. And I was like, oh, I do have a thing I do.
I do not. I have not tried to define it. I probably would if I went through a process of trying to define it. But generally, no. I think I would say that I try and approach it on its own terms, but I can't really, no, I've never really tried to define it.
Yeah.
I don't have a specific process.
I ask because I'm giving a talk soon about how you do this. I'm like, well, I think I do it this way, but maybe nobody else does.
I don't know. How do you do it?
Mine is usually just like a list of questions that kind of rapid fire. They're in 2 columns, one being formal and one being content / emotional, intellectual. Something has to grab me graphically, like it has to be a composition that pops or something has to draw you in. And then it's just this lineup of, is the artist getting across what they're trying to say? Can we grasp what they're trying to say? Are they saying it with too many things? Have they edited out some stuff? Like, it's just this kind of like, and then what happens is I get a slideshow going in my head of artists they should look at from pawing through box after box after box in various print rooms. I'm like, oh, you need to look at, Ruth Asawa or whoever. It's kind of random. It's not very structured, but it's kind of scattered. Well, it's kind of scattershot.
It sounds structured to me. Yeah.
Yeah. But then Ben and I talked this out a long time ago on one of the early podcast episodes. And his is all about reverse engineering the making of and the decisions that went into every element. And then he's a very structure oriented person. And he has this whole like diagram in his head.
Yeah.
That's not how I think.
Both sound much more structured. I think that mine is much more visceral initially. I think that I go through what you're talking about kind of after the fact. If I need to define or explain my reaction to someone else, but usually mine is pretty much so either I connect with or I don't. Mm-hmm. I think the strongest reactions are the things where I kind of don't know what it is right at first, where it gives me a little bit of a pause. And I have to figure it out as we go. May I introduce May?
Sure.
May, would you come say hi?
Hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes. So this is the other major part of C&C Editions, who is here working with me every day and has been an incredible help putting together the studio.
That's great. Well, you're both lucky people.
Yes,
I
we're
am.
both very
lucky.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
I
great.
didn't want to miss that. I think I have the same questions you do, but they come later.
Yeah, I try to speed up my ability to identify these things just because I started doing critiques when I was a curator at the BMA, and I had never done them. And I was like, I don't know that I can process stuff fast enough to be able to have a reaction, to be able to tell you anything that's useful or helpful or, all that stuff. And so I worked on it.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No, critiques are hard. They're very hard. And that's something that I struggled with when I was teaching, was trying to get students comfortable with critiques, because critiques are so difficult to get when you're out of school, and the chance to have a room full of people who are visually trained to give you feedback. And all of a sudden you're out of school and you're trying to make as an artist and you're in your studio. And that's once again why I like printmaking studios, is you pull that print and there's a good chance that there's somebody else there that can give you that little mini critique. That extra set of eyes is really helpful. Maybe it gets you to a place where you see something that you wouldn't have seen on your own or right away.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I agree with you about this sort of being taken out of your own head, which is, I think, a little harder for me with prints because they're framed in this very, but there's something about the all enveloping atmosphere of a sculpture that you're in, like the Naumann tunnel. We went to one of the James Turrell courtyards where there's a square cutout in this pavilion ceiling that was lit. And so you compared the colors to the sky as the sun was setting. And it just kept shifting, what was forward, what was back. Like you just couldn't tell where you were. It was spectacular. Spectacular. I couldn't get over it.
Yeah. And that's the same kind of thing that I like in art, is when there are multiple readings where you're not really sure where you're standing, where you can move in and you can find something small and you can move back and the picture changes. I think that art that's not so didactic, that there's a single reading, that there is openness for the individual, for the viewer to explore, is very exciting for me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, nicely said. What's coming up? I mean, I know you're getting rolling here with C&C, but anything you want to tell us about coming up in the next couple of months, year or so?
No, just working with artists. I've got a nice roster of artists I'm very excited to get rolling with. And
stay tuned for more.
Yeah. And again, I hope that it's kind of unfolds on its own. There are certain artists I like to work with, and I want to see how the projects unfold. The term master printer has always been problematic for me, because I feel that it comes from the Guild Ages, when you'd have a master silversmith or woodcarver or whatever, and those people were in charge of the work. It didn't mean that every master woodcarver was equivalent in skill or ability. I mean, I think it's a job title, and I like thinking that I can learn things, and thinking that with every artist that comes in, I can go like, oh, that's, I didn't really expect that to happen. And so that's what I'm looking for in the future of C&C Editions, is continuing that discovery.
Nice. Well said. Cole, it's been lovely talking to you today. I so appreciate you coming on Platemark. It's been a real pleasure.
It's a real treat for me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you reaching out.
You are very welcome. Thank you for listening to this episode of Platemark. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you to Cole for being a wonderful guest. I wanted to talk to him for a long time. I wanted to issue a quick reminder to everyone to mark your calendars for the last weekend in March for the Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair, a new print fair that will be occurring alongside the IFPDA fair. It will feature some 70 exhibitors, including some self-representing artists and some really wonderful print producers and publishers. All right, thank yous as usual go to Dan Fury for being my sound editor. Thank you so much, Dan, and also to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. Thank you to Lee Turner and Skip Barnhart for sending me sounds from their studios for me to use at the top and bottom of the pod in that soundscape I produced. Images that Cole and I talk about are over on the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com, and I think that might be everything I need to say. Oh, well, think about becoming a supporter. That would be useful for me. Thank you. It's just me. It's just me. All right. We will see you next time.